First of all, thank you, Madam Anderson, for inviting me, and to the ESN group for inviting me here to speak today. And I'm very honored and humbled to be receiving your award tomorrow night. In the winter of 2022, I'm not going to get into obviously the specifics of the pandemic. I think we all have lived through that. A small group of us connected, and most of us strangers, didn't know each other, connected and decided to drive to Ottawa to protest the tyrannical and draconian COVID-19 pandemic mandates. As the rest of the world was beginning to open up and ease the restrictions, our Prime Minister started to double down. We were not allowed to leave the country. They were actually talking at that time about ceasing even interprovincial travel in Canada. So we decided to come together as a group, and we organized the Freedom Convoy from home. We started on the 14th of January, and 10 days later we were rolling to Ottawa. And we never could have imagined the support that we were going to receive. We honestly thought that we would just drive there, you know, a small group of us. But what we saw, obviously, as you guys probably did too, on the sides of the roads and the overpasses, was an overwhelming number of Canadians out there to support us, who finally felt hope for the first time in years, who finally felt proud to be Canadian for the first time in years, and who saw what we were doing as a light in the dark. As you know, the takedown of the convoy was something that I never could have imagined that I would see in my country. I grew up watching that stuff happen in third world countries. On the 6th of February, there was a raid at one of our outposts where we kept our supplies, and they had snipers on the roof pointed at hardworking, peaceful Canadians. They stole our fuel, they took our food, and it was, like I said, something that I could not have imagined that I would have ever seen before. We had politicians calling us terrorists, domestic terrorists, racists, even accusing us of trying to burn down an apartment building and insinuating that the truckers were rapists. This is not the Canada that I grew up in. What's happening now is unprecedented. Canada, in my opinion, used to be a very free country, unless I grew up very naive, but that's what I was taught. We were a democracy, and what we saw was not democratic. We had hundreds of thousands of people in Ottawa, and they still refused to talk to us. Within the span of 3 weeks, we received $24 million in donations. The first GoFundMe campaign that we started, which was taking in $1 million a day in donations as we traveled across the country, was frozen after the politicians contacted GoFundMe and told them that we were domestic terrorists and that they were funding terrorism. We then started a Give, Send, Go, and the donors donated even more money, about $12 million, just over $12 million at that time. And that was also taken from us, except for that there is a little bit of money. There's about $3.5 million that they froze that's sitting in an escrow account. How they treated those donations and how they treated us is how you would treat a drug cartel. In Canada, unprecedented. Our Prime Minister ran away and hid and refused to even send anyone out to talk to us. And as a matter of fact, he even said that he's attended protests before, but only those that he supports. In my opinion, the leader of a country leads all of their people, not just the ones who believe in the same ideology. That is his job, and he failed us. They all failed us. We tried to speak to lots of the MPs, and they all said no. I was arrested on February the 17th, thrown into solitary confinement. I called it the dungeon. Accused at that time, I had one charge. It was counsel others to commit the offense of mischief, which did not occur. A few weeks later, well, first of all, I was denied bail. We had a bail hearing and I was denied bail, which is quite something in Canada, because murderers and rapists make bail. Most bail hearings last about 15 minutes. Mine lasted 2 days and cost usually about $50,000 in legal fees. So these are the people that we're dealing with. I spent 18 days in jail the first time I was arrested at the convoy. And I was re-arrested in the summer of 2022 after attending a Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms Awards dinner where they honored me with their Freedom Award. And at that dinner, there was a photograph taken of me with one of the gentlemen that's on my no contact order. I'm under bail conditions still, 2.5 years later. However, there was lawyers all around us. Anyways, for the first time in Canadian history, there was a Canada-wide warrant issued for my arrest for the charge of mischief. Unprecedented. Absolutely unprecedented. 2 homicide detectives flew to Calgary to pick me up and fly me back to Ottawa because they don't have things, like murders to investigate. I spent an additional 30 days in jail and was also denied bail again, finally getting out 1 day before my youngest daughter's birthday. It was the most peaceful and polite protest of all time. There was no violence. The streets of Ottawa were cleaner than they've ever been. We were feeding the homeless. We were clearing snow. We were cleaning up garbage. And this is how they treated us, because we did not agree with our Prime Minister's point of view. Currently, my co-accused, Mr. Chris Barber, who I rode across Canada with, and his son in his truck, and myself are still going through the longest mischief trial in history. We just finally wrapped up the evidence portion in this fall, and we're still waiting for our verdict, which we're expecting on March 12th. The Crown Prosecutor in our case is seeking 10 years in prison for mischief, which would be akin to spray painting the side of a building in most places. In the meantime, there are people getting out on bail all the time. There's a catch and release in Canada unless you are me, apparently. They're arrested for violent crimes. Violent crimes. In the first 2 months of our trial, the Ontario Provincial Court threw out 125 cases in order to prosecute ours. And of those, some of them were violent and sexual assaults. And they tossed them out in order to proceed with our prosecution, or as I like to say, our persecution. This is the current state of Canada. Right now, we are facing censorship of our media. Well, our mainstream media has been completely bought and paid for. They will never come out and question the Prime Minister. We are facing, just like other countries, censorship, online censorship bills disguised as keeping our children safe. This is the current state of Canada right now. And we need help. We need help. We've got a big road ahead of us, but I know that there's a lot of us that are committed to continue to fight because they don't scare me. They do not define my freedom. They can put me in jail. That doesn't mean I'm not free. I define that. So we're still fighting, and I'm totally anticipating that we will get a not guilty verdict in March. However, that said, the Crown prosecutors in all of the Freedom Convoy cases are appealing most of them. I only know of one case where they have not appealed a stay or a not guilty verdict. We're also being sued civilly for $300 million from a group in Ottawa who were upset about the honking horns and the diesel fumes. $300 million. Lawfare is alive and well in Canada, and I never would have imagined that I would see it. To date, the taxpayers of Canada have paid over $5 million for this prosecution, and Chris Barber and myself have incurred over $750,000 in legal fees. And we're just very fortunate that we have some organizations, charitable organizations, that are helping us fund our case. Because I'm not a millionaire, but this is what they're trying to do. All over the world, too, not just in Canada. I see it everywhere. is to demoralize and bankrupt you. But I'm here to tell you that they picked on the wrong woman.